Imagine a man who lived two lives at once. Half terrorist, half playboy. A man who terrified nations but also dazzled them with Ferraris, designer suits, and champagne-filled nights. His name was Valerio Crisis. To some, he was Italy's most wanted terrorist. To others, he was the mastermind of Britain's largest bank robbery. A man who stole more than $60 million and vanished into history like a ghost. But for Valerio, it was never just about the money. It was about the thrill, the spotlight, and the unshakable belief that he was born to live as a king, even behind bars. This is the story of the man they called the Wolf. Valerio was born on January 22, 1955, in the quiet town of Ascoli Piceno, Italy. His childhood could have been ordinary. His father, a respected lawyer, embodied tradition and discipline. His mother, a stylish boutique owner, embodied elegance and taste. His brother followed the family path into the legal profession. But Valerio, he was different. He had no interest in law or order. At 16, when other boys were stealing candy or bicycles for kicks, Valerio chose a different road. His eyes were set not on petty mischief but on power, wealth, and danger. Italy in the 1970s was a breeding ground for extremism. Political violence tore through the country. Left-wing radicals clashed with right-wing extremists, and universities became battlegrounds of ideology. In this storm, Valerio found his tribe among neo-fascists. Under the influence of terrorist leader Gianni Nardi, he grew convinced that violence could ignite revolution. At 17, he proved his commitment with an explosion, blowing up a local power station and making headlines across Italy. That single act was like a switch. It transformed Valerio from a restless teen into a rising figure in Italy's underground war. Soon, he joined the Youth Front, the youth arm of Italy's far-right movement. They painted swastikas on walls, spread fear, and tried to dominate the streets. But for Valerio, politics was only the first layer of ambition. Violence gave him identity, but crime gave him freedom. Through the 1970s and into the early 1980s, Valerio's name became synonymous with bombings, shootings, and audacious robberies. He wasn't just a criminal. He was a symbol of fear, and the police gave him a name that fit perfectly: the Wolf. But unlike many radicals, Valerio didn't just dream of revolutions. He dreamed of Ferraris, expensive champagne, and women who looked like they belonged on magazine covers. His life was as much about image as it was ideology. Crime wasn't just rebellion, it was currency for his extravagant life. By the 1980s, Italy was too small for him. He had pulled off over 50 armed robberies, left behind a trail of enemies, and closed every escape route. So he reinvented himself, not in hiding, but in luxury, by moving to London. In London, Valerio settled in St. John's Wood, one of the city's wealthiest neighborhoods. He barely spoke English, but his confidence carried him. His accent wasn't a weakness, it was charm. He roared through London streets in a Ferrari, dated glamorous blondes like they were trophies, and lived like royalty even in exile. But kingdoms don't run on appearances alone. A king needs wealth to keep the throne, and Valerio was about to orchestrate a heist unlike anything Britain had ever seen. His opportunity came through Latif, the general manager of the Knightsbridge Safe Deposit Center. On paper, Latif was respectable. Behind closed doors, he was drowning in drug addiction and debts. Valerio spotted weakness like a predator. He lent Latif money, turning debt into leverage, until Latif realized he was caught in the wolf's trap. By then, it was too late. The Knightsbridge Safe Deposit Center was a fortress of wealth. Royal family members, celebrities, and even criminals trusted it with their most valuable treasures. But Valerio found its weak link and exploited it. On a quiet summer day in July 1987, two well-dressed men walked in, asking to rent a deposit box. They passed through layers of security, escorted deep into the vault. Then, the calm shattered. The manager and guards suddenly found guns pressed against their heads. Doors were locked, alarms silenced. 8 more men in fake security uniforms stormed inside. A sign was hung outside, closed for maintenance. Inside, it wasn't chaos. It was precision. The men worked like professionals, cracking open boxes, pulling out bundles of cash, sparkling jewels, and heavy gold bars. Within 2.5 hours, the Wolf's team had looted between $40 and $60 million. It was the largest bank robbery in British history. When the robbers slipped out into the streets, London had no idea it had just been robbed blind. An hour later, the next shift arrived to find the vault ripped open and staff tied up. By then, Valerio was celebrating, tossing diamonds across an apartment floor, filling a bathtub with banknotes, living the dream most men only imagine. But the dream carried a flaw, a bloody fingerprint left behind in the vault. It was Valerio's. The Wolf had been unmasked. On August 12, 1987, police launched sweeping raids, arresting 9 suspects and recovering millions. But Valerio? He slipped away to Latin America with his share of the loot. Only 10 million was ever recovered. The rest vanished into offshore accounts, front companies, and criminal networks. Valerio could have disappeared forever, living quietly on stolen millions. But that wasn't his style. He craved the spotlight. So he did something reckless. He returned to England to retrieve his beloved Ferrari Testarossa. It was arrogance in its purest form, and police were ready. On October 12, 1987, they cornered him on the road, smashed through his windshield, and dragged him out like any common criminal. In minutes, the Wolf was caged. Even in custody, Valerio wasn't broken. He wore sunglasses, grinned for cameras, and turned his trial into theater. Reporters called him a Playboy bandit, and Valerio reveled in it. He even declared in court, "Maybe I'm a romantic lunatic, but money is the last thing I care about." For him, crime was never about wealth. It was about thrill. He was sentenced to 22 years in prison, but even behind bars, he lived like a legend. Transferred to Italy under extradition, Valerio continued to bend prison life to his will. He worked by day, strolled cafes by night, and returned to his cell like it was an apartment. Prison didn't tame him, it gave him new partners. He met Antonio Malatesta, a mafia figure tied to smuggling and kidnapping. Together, they began plotting again, but fate caught up. During a routine day release, Valerio and Malatesta prepared for another operation. Suspicious police officers confronted them. Malatesta fled. Valerio drew his magnum, firing at officers. A firefight erupted. A policeman was wounded, but he fought back, unleashing a hail of bullets. Valerio fell, riddled with gunfire, his reign ending on the asphalt. The Wolf was dead. Valerio's story is one of contradiction. Born into privilege but seduced by violence, a revolutionary turned criminal, a thief who lived like a king. He defied 2 countries, pulled off one of the greatest robberies in history, and lived by his own rules until his final breath. For all his arrogance, for all his thrill-seeking, one truth remained: no one outruns fate. This is the legend, and the downfall, of Valerio Crisis, the Playboy they called the Wolf.